It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Senate Democrats have unveiled new voting rights legislation. Good thing, because ultimately, if you can't get to the ballot box, you can't make the changes we need. This is called the Freedom to Vote Act. Amy Klobuchar is, I guess, the person who brought it forth. Lots of co-sponsors. Joe Manchin's on it. John Tester, Tim Kaine, Raphael Warnock. Still not going to get to the 60 votes. You're never going to get 10 Republicans to vote for it. So at some point, Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema and the rest of them are going to have to decide, what do you do with the filibuster? Ultimately, you got to get something accomplished, because Republican states across this country are doing everything in their power to limit the ability of we the people to get to the ballot box. So I'm telling you right now, we need something. We need something to get pushed through. We need to get access to our ballot box and undo some of the damage we've seen in Republican states across the country. And, you know, for me, it's going back and undoing what the Supreme Court did several years back when they got rid of preclearance. Things were working. And then you have the corporate Supreme Court who decided, no, things are just fine. Things are just fine. We're going to let states like Tennessee decide, whatever they want. And what we've seen is a lot of nastiness. Undo some of that, return the ability of the federal government to oversee some of the things the states are doing, and maybe we move in the right direction. Also, some legislation moving in the budget reconciliation side. We're going to start looking at taxing the rich, about damn time, something we've needed to do for a very long time. Good stuff. But today I wanted to start with something that just sent me into an absolute rage. And North Carolina Representative Madison Cawthorn, I'm sure you've seen Madison Cawthorn. He's somebody who he wants attention. So he does the most outrageous things possible to get that attention. And he got my attention today. The other day he tweeted out that he was going to file a bill to gut OSHA. He's going to file a bill to gut the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Because, hey, during a pandemic, who needs to help workers? Who needs to protect people on the job? So as I was sitting, I was thinking about this. I'm going, first, Madison Cawthorn was somebody who's been injured through no fault of his own. A buddy of his was driving. They were driving together somewhere. The buddy fell asleep, smashed into a wall. Madison Cawthorn's paralyzed. This would be like saying, hey, sorry, better luck next time. And not giving you the ability to sue and for damages and to help you lead the life that he's leading. No. Not him. Just workers. Just working people. And, this is one of those things where, I'm sitting here, I'm going, yes, the Republican Party is eating their own achievements, because OSHA was passed in 1970 and signed by Richard Milhous Nixon. This was a Republican initiative to protect working people. Not to mention, again, Nixon would be unrecognizable in this party because he passed the EPA too, something that Republicans have been trying to gut for decades. And look, I'm not surprised by any stretch of the imagination that there's a Republican out there willing to abuse the power of government to weaken labor standards. I'm not surprised at that at all. And I'm not surprised that they would want to make much more dangerous working conditions. Go back to the last administration and how they gutted the number of inspectors that were out inspecting workplaces. Go back and look at the last administration who did nothing to protect people in the workplace. Not surprising. Now understand, this is the party who believes in no rights at work. These are the people who believe in the what I call the no rights at work agenda. The ability to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, and conditions. Absolutely not. We want as dangerous as conditions as possible. And what they're doing is they're pushing this so-called right to work, which has no rights, no work, no value for working people, but power for the bosses. They want to do away. Look what they did with unemployment compensation insurance. First thing they did is they wanted to take that away. They wanted to destroy it. They wanted to weaken it. Some states actually cut the number of weeks down. I think Florida at one point was like 12 weeks. You go through the list of things that protect workers' compensation, prevailing wage laws. Don't get me started on the Fair Labor Standards Act that they've been against since 1938. Minimum wage, overtime laws, child labor laws. Remember back when Newt Gingrich was still, talking about running for president and said, what we need to send those kids who are going to school. We need to get them to clean the bathrooms before school so we can fire those janitors and teach them value. But we're just going to do it with poor kids. We're not going to do it with the rich kids. No, we can't do that. But it got me thinking today that we're in a moment where the Republican wants, things that they've been dreaming about, their wet dream list, is now within grasp. And this tweet by Madison Cawthorn to gut OSHA just is like the cherry on the top of this. Because OSHA is the organization that is supposed to make sure that our workplaces are safe. They're the ones who are supposed to hold companies accountable for dangerous workplaces. Now, granted, we're at the lowest number of inspections they've probably ever been at. They've conducted the fewest number of inspections over the last term of any administration in history. And look, the Biden administration's trying. They're trying to ramp things up. But it just doesn't happen with the snap of fingers. So now you've got Cawthorn going, we're going to defund it. We're going to gut it. And that's what they want. They want to deregulate everything so we can return to desperation. The ultimate goal of the Republican Party has always been to return the nation's workers to poverty, to turn the nation back over to the owners, the owners who owned the workers and the workers who were compliant, desperate, afraid to speak up, fearful they'd be blacklisted and their families ostracized, poverty, desperation. And it was out of weakness that they swallowed their pride, accepted their lot in life, and kept their heads down so they could keep feeding their kids. This is where they want to take us back to. They want to return us back to the good old days of the Lochner Era, the good old days of liberty of contract. And you go, Rick, what are you talking about, Lochner Era? In this country, the Supreme Court had decided the Lochner Era is from about 1897 to 1937. It's the time when the Supreme Court ruled that any infringement on a contract between an employer and an employee was a violation of your constitutional rights. The 14th Amendment guaranteed you the right to be able to enter into a really bad agreement. And it started back in 1897 because there was a case out of Louisiana where the state legislature in Louisiana said, you know what? We don't think insurance companies, these maritime insurance companies, should be able to cheat our citizens. They should have to have an agent in the state. So you should have some roots in the community so that if you do cheat us, we can come get you. Well, the Supreme Court said, well, that's a bridge too far. And they ruled that meager legislation, which was to prevent fraud, they ruled that unconstitutional, citing liberty of contract. You should be able to be cheated whenever you want to. You fast forward to 1905, the state of New York passes the New York Bake Shop Act that limits the number of hours a baker can work in the baking industry in New York. Limits it at 60 hours. Now, this guy, Joseph Lochner, who owned a bakery, a couple of times got caught violating it. He was fined. took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in his favor. You're right. You can work your workers as long as you want. You can have them work in the most unsanitary conditions, in the most desperate conditions. Look, because if they're desperate enough, if their kids are hungry enough, if their family's deep enough in poverty that they'll work for desperation wages and horrible conditions, that's their liberty. Thus, liberty of contract. And that they upheld that all the way until 1937 when the West Coast Hotel versus Parish case came up. What is commonly known as the stitch in time to save nine, because at the time, FDR was talking about packing the courts with people who would move through his New Deal agenda. Part of that being minimum wage laws, maximum hour laws, child labor laws, protections in the workplace, rights on the jobs for workers. Oh my goodness. How dare he? What radical thoughts. You know, the things that we take for granted today, the things that we think were, oh my gosh, who could possibly be against the minimum wage? The Republicans. Who could possibly be against overtime after 40 hours? Republicans. Who could possibly be against safe working conditions, Rick? Madison Cawthorn and the Republicans. Who could possibly want to put children back into the mines and the factories? Do I need to answer that? Our friends in the Republican Party. And this is what they've always wanted. They've always wanted to return us to this liberty of contract, only they use a different word. It's now freedom. You should have the freedom to be cheated at every turn, which is why we've got so many gig workers. Because it's your freedom to make a bad deal. Look, most gig workers I know, they want a job, man. They want to be able to support their families. They want to have some say. But corporate America, with their power, with their money, their influence, and a well-paid-for Supreme Court, are moving us back in this direction. The legal thoughts in this country right now, thank you, Federalist Society, thank you, Chamber of Commerce, thank you, state policy networks of think tanks all around this country who have been sowing the seeds of poison into the minds of workers going, yes, I should be able to make my own bad deal. How dare you tell me I can't work 100 hours a week at straight time? Well, we as a working class have said that we don't want to live simply to work, that our labor is how we support our families. And there should be some parameters there. Every step forward that the working class has ever made in the history of civilization has been because of the labor movement, because of organizing, because of workers coming together and standing in solidarity and demanding in the face of the court system that from 1897 through 1937 was decidedly against them, was decidedly sticking them in the back at every turn and making life desperate. You know, I tell the story all the time of a guy I worked with, back like 30 years ago. He said when he got back from Vietnam, they gave him a little bit of money when he got out of the Army. And he came back to central Pennsylvania and paid the company store what his parents had owned them for decades. And it was the first time in the history of his family, who had been here like 100 years, the first time in the history of his family that they weren't indebted to the company store. Because that's how much power these companies had. You had to buy things from the company store. You had to go to the company doctor. You had to live in company housing. They had you by the short hairs at every turn. And there's a movement in this country right now, led by our friends in the Republican Party, and some of them are dupes. Some of them have no idea what I'm talking about. Some of them have no idea. They think, no, Donald Trump was a pro-labor guy. Even though every decision he made while he was in office was to make unions weaker, to make the ability for working people to collectively bargain that much weaker, to tear down the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. And the Madison Cawthorns of the world and all of the hey, look at me Republicans who are just looking for attention, they're pushing it too. And I will give Madison Cawthorn the benefit of the doubt that he doesn't know anything, that he's completely ignorant of what OSHA is, what it does, why it exists, and who it protects. I'm going to give him that he's just ignorant. Because to him, this is just about the attention that it's going to get him. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to help people be in much worse conditions. And the question I come back to, if not our government, if not OSHA, who will protect workers in the workplace? We've seen through history what happens when desperation workers are stuck in a situation where employers have all the power and all the control. We have seen what's happened. And sadly, in this country, we don't learn our history. Labor doesn't have history in this country. We learn the history of the captains of industry, how wonderful they are, how they built the country. You never hear the stories of the hundreds of thousands, the millions of people who died on the job in factories and in mines and in every industry across this country. You never hear that. No. That would mean that the captains of industry just used and abused average everyday working people like you and me, used us up and shoved us off to the curb to be dealt with like trash. That's a difficult reality to come up with. It's much easier to think, no, they're all benevolent employers. My employer's different. And the reason that you may think that is because as of today, workers still have protections in place in law. OSHA still is here, gutted, weaker than it's been probably in my entire lifetime, but still here. This to me is a moment where I reach out to my working class Republican friends and look, we can disagree on a lot of issues, but this is one of those that there should be no disagreement on. We want safe working conditions. We want decent wages for workers. We want good benefits. We want to go home in the exact condition we went to work in. And if something happens, heaven forbid something happens, we need to hold someone accountable, especially when they're negligent. We're in a moment right now where it seems like nothing is off base for these folks. There's no depth that they're not willing to go just to score their cheap Twitter points. And that's really, and again, as I said, I'm going to give Madison Cawthorn kind of a pass because he's stupid. This was just about scoring cheap Twitter points. But by pushing that, he has stepped into a much larger frame, a much more dangerous area than just, hey, I trolled the libtards. These are people's lives. This is their health. These are millions of workers across this country. And he's willing to say, you know what? The heck with you. I scored my points. And that's all that matters. It's terrible. It's despicable. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On The Rick Smith Show.
Thanks for watching the show. If you like what we do, there are lots of ways to support us and get a bunch of great content at the same time. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Rick Smith Show. Search for us on YouTube for tons of new video content and a live stream of the show every day. Be sure to like and subscribe while you're there. If you want to follow us on social media, we're easy to find on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. You can stream the show using the Free Speech TV app or watch us in one of our 2 time slots each week, Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern or Saturday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Podcast fans can find us pretty much anywhere, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and the TuneIn app. We upload new content almost every day, but we began as a radio show, and because of that, we work hard to make sure the show is free and accessible to community radio stations from coast to coast. If you're a fan of the radio show, call your local station and thank them for putting us on. If we're not on your local radio dial, call your local community radio station and ask for us. They're not a bunch of corporate hacks, so they'll listen. I know this is a lot of information to take in all at once, so let's make this simpler. The fastest and easiest way to access all this great content is by going to our website, thericksmithshow.com. There you'll find links to all the different ways to enjoy the show and all the ways you can support us and those who help us fight back against the corporate media machine. We've been right up in their greedy little faces since 2005. And with your help, we plan to keep fighting the good fight for many years to come. Thanks for your help. We hope you enjoyed the show, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.